Hey everyone, I am Kathy McClear, State Director for AARP Minnesota, and we are just a few short weeks away from the 2022 election. And voters 50 and older are the most powerful voters in America, and you will be the deciders in this election. That's why AARP Minnesota is working to ensure that voters 50 plus in our state know how, when, and where to vote. So again, I am Kathy McClear, the State Director for AARP Minnesota, and I am so thankful to be joined today by Debby Erickson, and an election administrator in Brainerd, Minnesota. So Debby, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, Election Day, November 8th, it'll be here before we know it. And for someone who likes to go to the polls on Election Day and cast their ballot with their fellow voters, where do they need to go to vote?
So that's a great question. Oftentimes people aren't really sure where they do go to vote. For most of us, we're always going to go to a local precinct polling location in the neighborhood where we live. In a lot of cases, that is your local city hall or your town hall, depending on where it is that you live. It could also be a school, it could be a library, community center. Oftentimes it just depends on what type of community you're living in and how many precincts are there. The easiest way to find out where you're going to go to vote in your community is to go to mnvotes.gov. And there's a poll finder website there. It actually says right on the main website, where do I vote? You type in your address and it is going to give you the information of where your polling location is, the address, and also directions on how to get there, as well as a sample ballot of who's going to be on your ballot in that polling place.
That's really important about the sample ballot. That's a great thing to have with you. What other documentation might you need when you go to the polls?
So for most people who are already pre-registered voters, you don't need to necessarily bring any documentation with you. If you've gotten registered at least 20 days before Election Day, the election judges or the poll workers in your precinct are going to ask for your name. They're going to ask you to verify some information such as your address or your date of birth to make sure that they have the right voter in front of them. And then they'll have you sign in and you'll be allowed to vote. If you recently moved into your precinct or you have not voted at least once every 4 years, you are going to need to register before you can vote on Election Day. And in Minnesota, we do have Election Day registration, so you can do the whole process right there at your polling place. But you are going to need to have a proof of residence, and this is where that documentation would come in. Most of the time, you're going to be able to use your Minnesota driver's license or ID card that has your address in that precinct. But if you've recently moved or you don't have that information, there are 8 different ways that you can prove your registration in Minnesota. And any of those ways you can find on that website, mnvotes.gov, or contact your local elections official who can help you with that information.
That's really helpful. What are the hours that the polls are open?
Across most of the state of Minnesota, all polling places are going to be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you live in a small rural township, it's possible that your precinct will not open until as late as 10 a.m. They have some flexibility there, but the wide majority of our precincts are open from 7 a.m. and everybody closes at 8 p.m.
And just a minute ago, you talked about where you can find your polling place. There might be a few voters in Minnesota for whom that changed this year.
That is correct.
Why did that happen?
So we have this thing called redistricting that happens once every 10 years following a census. And basically what the law says is that we have to be able to say that our elected representatives are representing as equal a population as possible. In this particular case, a precinct line or a polling location line may have been changed in your community. It's most likely that you were sent a notice in the mail by your local elections office sometime in July if anything changed with your districts or where your polling location is. So it's always a good idea if you did not receive that, check out that information online or contact your local official as well.
All right, so somebody's ready to go to the polls. They know what time, they know where. What are some other helpful tips for once voters are at their polling place? What should they bring? What should they leave at home? Any other tips?
So that's a great question too, because there are a couple of things that they want to be aware of. Number one, if you are voting or you are in line to vote or register at 8 p.m., you still are offered the opportunity to vote. Anybody who's in line still gets to vote, even if they are not complete with that process by 8 o'clock. So if you're in line, stay in line. You're going to be allowed that opportunity. Second, make sure that you leave any political attire or memorabilia or bumper stickers, literature, anything like that away from the polling place. The polling locations themselves are actually nonpartisan. They are neutral locations, so please don't wear any political attire. And also keep in mind that if you do need assistance when you come to the polling place, you are able to have someone come with you and provide you with that assistance. You can bring a trusted friend, you can bring a neighbor, whatever it might be, who could help you with that. Or again, those poll workers and election judges are there to help you as well. In any case, if you have any problems or issues at your polling location, you do have a right to file a complaint form, and any of those poll workers at that polling place can provide you with a complaint form, or you can also get one online at the Secretary of State's office as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Debby Erickson, and Elections Administrator for Brainerd, Minnesota. We appreciate the great information from you today. And for more information on how, when, and where to vote, you can visit aarp.org/MN elections.